Coming up on ParaTruth Reborn, we've got Raven Digitalis talking about his book, Shadow Magick Spellbook.
Welcome to ParaTruth.
How's it going, ParaTruthers? Welcome to another episode of ParaTruth Reborn. My name is Justin, and I'm very happy to welcome Raven Digitalis to the show. Raven, welcome to ParaTruth Reborn.
Hello, it's so nice to be here, and thank you to all the listeners. Thanks to you guys, all the producers, everybody. So, yep, I am Raven Digitalis. That's Raven like the bird, and Digitalis like the foxglove plant. And I'm an author and just released a new book. So I'm so happy that you could interview me about the new book, Shadow Magick Spellbook.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome conversation. The first thing I really wanted to ask you is, how did you first get involved with Shadow Magick?
I think shadow work is the work of a lifetime. We're all doing it, or should be doing it anyway.
Right.
It's not any one thing. It's very difficult to pin down. So yeah, if somebody is summoning demons, I guess that's shadow work. Sure. But that's not my jam. The first chapter in my book begins with the Jungian shadow self and working with our repressed, depressed, suppressed emotions and feelings and experiences, and getting to know ourselves a little bit better. And then for me, with my interpretation of shadow work and how I feel it helps others the best, is that after that chapter, I move on to interpersonal shadow work, because we're always dealing with other people's shadows as well as our own. So everybody is their own universe. We have all this stuff around us, and we interact with other people focused while we are focused on ourselves, because we are ourselves, and have this interaction of shadow with others. So a big theme of that chapter, the second chapter in Shadow Magick Spellbook, is about protection. So some people will come to the book looking for curses and hexes and how to get back at your ex, but you're not going to find that in my book. There are some alternatives to that are more karmically aligned or ethical, in my opinion, that I present. But interacting with others also includes anxiety, social anxiety, and those kind of themes. Then I move on to the shadow of nature. So that's where we delve into eclipses, new moons, different components we can work with, like animal parts or graveyard dirt, things like that can be very beneficial on our shadow work journey. And then it goes into finally the other world section, which explores the other dimensions, which some would call paranormal. Not necessarily. I've heard the term paranatural. Dealing with working with ancestors, with spirits, with hauntings, with astral projection and dreaming.
Okay.
So that's a good little summary of my new book.
Okay. Now, when talking about shadow work, a lot of people will get scared about that word, but why do people fear their shadow self so much?
I think that in society we are taught to be a certain way and behave and perform in certain manners, and we need to put up a face, and this face and this front is cross-cultural. It's ancient, um, for various reasons too. So when we put up a face and a front, yeah, it's like a mask. Yeah, it doesn't have to be disingenuous, but it is like a mask. And so I think the shadow portions of ourselves and the world that we live in, and being totally honest about our experiences, is kind of frowned on, because that's not really everyday conversation. Like, you know, you're not going to tell the clerk at the gas station that you got slapped by your uncle when you were 19.
Yeah. I would hope not.
So there is an element of compartmentalization there, and a lot of that is protective too. I understand it. I get the gist of it. It's very protective. There are certain portions of ourselves that we reveal to other people, and when we are alone with ourselves and our pets, for example, um, and the gods, the deities, the spirits, the higher powers, however you see the higher powers, that's where it's at. When we are alone with ourselves and the frequency of the universe, that's where the real change happens, because there's nobody to perform for.
Hmm. Now, what made you want to embrace instead of avoid your shadow self?
Well, I've always been a goth, you know. I was a gothic and industrial DJ for 19 years, and I've always just had, a fan of like creative horror movies and um, dark art, um, that purges the psyche, dark music, things that purge the psyche. So I have always felt a lot of empathy, and that's also what I write about, is empathy. Those are my other series of books and Oracle deck, the Empath's Oracle deck. But I felt this empathy with shadow working, shadow purging, dark art, because um, I could relate to the the merging of the self with the shadow, and the alchemical process of purging the shadow self to understand it better.
Okay. Now, something that a lot of people don't realize is that you have to build a foundation first before you start doing this work. What happens if someone skips that step?
Right. That reminds me of, s- because I'm a professional tarot reader also, that reminds me of some folks that have approached me recently, wanting to delve deeply, deeply into the tarot, which in itself is life. The whole deck of tarot in a perfect tarot deck is life itself in a pack. Um, so some people want to just go all the way into all the astrology, all the Kabbalah, all of the color schemes, all of the timing, all these things. And I'm like, no, take a step back. Let's start with the foundation first, like you said, the foundation, and build from there. So I'll suggest different ways to work up to that. And it's the same thing with magic and metaphysics. Life itself is magic. Everything's magic. The fact that we exist is magical. So there's nothing that is not magic, is how I see it. And So I suggest to people to study a number of traditions and cultures and ways of working magic to gain that foundation first, and then see what they're called toward themselves individually.
Now, what do you mean by being called to something?
Well, for example, my genetic lineage is Norse and Pennsylvania Deutsch, which is basically German.
Okay.
And I have no resonance with runes or um, the Norse gods and goddesses. No disrespect at all. It's just I don't have resonance there. But my resonance is very much Hindustani, very, very, very Hindu. So I consider myself an American Hindu as well as a witch and occultist. And I love to balance those two spheres.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people will have a lot of negative thoughts, and some people try and associate that with the shadow. How do you recognize your shadow versus just having those negative thoughts?
Well, negative thoughts are very much part of the shadow. So this is where I refer back to Buddhism and Buddhist mindfulness practice, like core Buddhism.
Okay.
Back from oneself and saying, okay, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling. Let me take a step back for a moment. I'm the observer of these things. Just like when my anxiety spikes up, for example. One thing that helps me a lot is being like, okay, I am not anxious. I don't have this anxiety and this panic attack coming on. My brain does. My body is responding like this. I need to take a step back and divorce myself from the physiology of the thing and be like, okay, let me observe what's happening in my body and mind. And that's mindfulness. So I always refer back to that. It can be scary for sure to think about the shadow. And yet at the same time, this, from our perspective, the sun goes down every day, every night. Darkness falls. We sleep and dream. We're working with darkness every single day.
Mm.
It's nothing to be afraid of. Um, the trauma imprints can be very scary when it comes to shadow work, especially internal shadow work, like imprints of trauma and challenge that we've had growing up through any kind of relationship. And so that's a very scary part. And this is why in Shadow Magick Spellbook, I recommend that people talk to a therapist if they need that. I know that therapy has probably saved my life in the past. I don't have a current therapist, but in the past, oh boy, yeah, I needed that talk therapy. I needed TMS, again, TMS, brain magnet therapy, to dissolve my chronic depression. There are so many, and EMDR has been very helpful. There are so many tools out there to help us, medications even on low dose. Like that's helped me tremendously. So we need to approach the shadow on our own terms, and we need to get a little bit uncomfortable at the same time.
Okay. Now, the is there a way to do this work incorrectly? And if so, can it be dangerous to do shadow work if you're doing it incorrectly?
Well, the only incorrect thing would be, in my version of this is to try to curse somebody or enact revenge, because usually what that means is that the other person has been traumatized also, and they don't know how to deal with it. So the biggest warning with shadow work of any type is, well, don't work with spirits who are jerks, and don't work with people who are jerks. Work with yourself. That's what it comes down to, is working with ourselves, not trying to influence other people unless it's protective. I do have a ritual about cord cutting, of course, in the spell book. And in the second chapter of interact with other people. There are things like that, and establishing social boundaries and things like that that are very good. The wrong way to work with the shadow is to project one's own shadow onto other people. That's why we need that foundation of self-awareness.
Okay. Now, is your shadow literally just you?
It's a part of us, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we are all shadow and light. It's a big dance. It's a big interplay. Everything in life it's all shadow and light. We have daytime, we have nighttime, we have awakeness, we have sleepness. And so everything is this whole dance and interplay. So simply focusing on the light, which can be amazing, um, can neglect the shadow portions, the hidden portions of oneself and one's patterns. This also, I believe, goes back to past lives.
Mm.
So we have certain imprints that we carry over from past lives in addition to this lifetime. And these things can progress until we learn and understand and grow from them.
Okay. Now, you wrote this spell book. How does this spell book differ from other spell books?
I would say that the biggest way that Shadow Magick Spellbook differs from others is that I encourage people to modify every spell and ritual and ceremony in the book. I say, don't do it how I wrote it. Take this and run with it and make it your own. Make it personal, rather than doing it like a recipe by the book. So that's the biggest difference, is that there are 144 workings in there, and I say, make them your own. Do not do them how I wrote them exactly. This is your framework. Go for it. Do what you do. Do surrounding ceremonies with this, or prayers, or whatever your inclination is, and then incorporate what I've discovered in there. Because spirituality is it's an evolving thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a static thing. We don't have to do things by the book. When it comes to ceremonial magic, like with planetary work, these things are much more specific. And with deity work, the thing in my book is that I do not have any workings with particular gods or goddesses or deities. That's for the reader to incorporate.
Okay.
And I do that very specifically, intentionally, because I want people to modify what I've discovered and created and co-created, really. And when it comes to deities and planetary energies and these very specific things, they require specific offerings and honorings. And with my book, I'm like, incorporate that if you want to. And if not, then don't. And honor your ancestors. Always honor your ancestors.
Now, is that kind of like when it comes to any spell work, is it best to just make it your own instead of just like following a recipe just because it makes it a more personable thing for you?
That's how I feel personally. Yeah. I do know some people who very much cognitively follow ancient Greek and Egyptian spells and rituals to the letter.
Okay.
And they have success with that. It's also, again, a co-creative process. So if you think that this spell needs to be done in this exact way with these like Latin or Sanskrit words or whatever, and must burn these herbs, must have this time alignment, this lunar cycle, and very specific, then yeah, you might create more success because that's the intention that you've put into it.
Mhm.
Whereas with witchcraft, it's much more intuitive. And that's often called like low magic instead of high magic.
Okay.
Not that low is worse or lesser than. It's just it's more terrestrial. It's more intuitive based rather than cosmic based. So that's why I encourage, like in my book, if you don't have Solomon's seal root, you can use galangal or other substitutions, and I have a whole glossary in the back of the book that provides an index of um, substitutions and things like that.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned different tools that you can use in your spell work, but is does intention matter more than the tools themselves?
Yes, I very much believe that. So a person can light a candle and project extreme energy and life force into that candle, into those prayers, into whatever they're going for. And that can, you know, yield so much more success than somebody who goes like for 3 days building up an entire ritual and doing it exactly on point. But that can also yield success. It depends on the person
Mm.
and what we're built for and what we vibe with. So, I will integrate those kind of things into my practice. I'll be like, well, this feels right. And historically, this is correct for this. Um, so it's really it really boils down to the person. So that's the intention aspect, because if you know that it's going to work, it'll work.
Okay. It kind of goes along the lines of the Christian practice of, believing that you have it before. And I know that it goes through multiple religions and even different practices of magic as well. So that I find that very fascinating. And that, even with what we call today the law of attraction, you have to believe that you have it, and that is your intention in setting that.
Yeah, the law of attraction, that's actually an ancient hermetic principle, and probably long before hermeticism came along. um, at the same time, with the law of attraction, we don't want to trick ourselves, because we always have that shadow self, the
Mhm.
unconscious mind, that's like, if I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, I am so beautiful, I'm so handsome, every day there's that unconscious part of the mind that says, no, you're not.
Mhm.
You're fooling yourself. What are you doing? And so fake it till you make it is a thing. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think it takes a lot of many different approaches to conquer insecurities and fears and self-judgments that we all have. Dealing with aging, dealing with body changes, with relationship changes, all these things. It takes work. We need to work on ourselves, and nobody is perfect. And that is the perfection, is how I see it, is that nobody's perfect. That is the perfection of it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Now, for anybody who is wanting to start doing this work, can beginners actually do this work safely?
Well, like I said, therapy has probably saved my life. Talk therapy. Um, and I have a therapist from age like 16, and then, switched onto a few different others. I don't currently have a therapist, but I think that is a great point for perspective, because we need that outside perspective to know ourselves better, at least to consider ourselves better. We don't have to agree with everything that the therapist says. It's not the word of God. It's what their training and their empathy hopefully delivers, and their sympathy, and just understanding. Um, so, I had a therapist who only cared about himself, like, a couple years ago. And so I was like, I've gotten what I needed, and thank you, and moved on. And every other talk therapist that I've had since and before then has been very empathetic. It's hard work, but we do need that outside perspective. And at the same time, like I was saying, we don't need to believe everything that everybody says. Just because somebody says it doesn't make it true about
Right.
us, or judgments, with their judgments. And we all make mistakes. So we do need to be humble and accountable for mistakes that we make and slip ups that we make. And if somebody doesn't forgive that or understand that, then F them. They can F off.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Now, something that's kind of in the book, and I've read it in other places, is liminal spaces. What are liminal spaces, and why are they so powerful?
Right. Liminal spaces. So, um, my friend, Laura, um, writes about that quite a bit. Um, she's on Llewellyn as well. So she has some books about the liminal. Um, so liminal spaces are places in between now and then, in between here and there. For example, dusk is falling right now where I'm at here in Montana, in Missoula, Montana. So dusk is falling right now, and that this is a liminal space. No wonder my kitty cat is acting up and being like, "Oh, this is a time." And other examples of liminal spaces are cemeteries, crossroads, even like the new moon, or even the full moon, eclipses, because we're in between one stage and another. That's the thing. That's where the magic happens. We're in between one space or another. This can also happen, of course, be invoked in meditation, or ritual. So here we are, um, creating a space between the worlds in meditation or ritual, and that's a liminal space in and of itself. By the way, Laura Tempest Zakroff is the friend that I was mentioning earlier. Laura Tempest Zakroff with a Z. For those who are listening, she just made a new book also on Llewellyn. Has some oracle decks and other things, but she speaks a lot about liminal spaces. And so liminal just means in between. It's the in between.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you've mentioned this multiple times about acknowledging your ancestors and communicating with them, and working with them. How real is that interaction, or is it something where like people would think that it's just something in their head?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it all blends together because a lot of it is in our head and then a lot of it is external. So I hear so many times about people, getting signs from their departed, dearly departed, in the form of birds or flowers or bees or synchronicities and things like this. And I think there's so much to be said about that. I think that's very real. And there's also this interplay with the personal self. Like, it's like, is this real? Am I misinterpreting? Am I just trying to superimpose something paranormal or supernatural onto um, just like a normal daily experience? So there's this huge interplay that happens. And that's up for everybody to decide individually. Like, is this actually a message from my friend, or am I just making it up? Or could it be both? Does it have to be one or the other? Can it be paradoxical? Can we have that dichotomy at the same time? Because I don't think everything is mutually exclusive. And psychedelic mushrooms certainly taught me that we can interplay with our mind and reality because we are nature.
Mm.
We are those synchronicities. Those are constantly working with us, and we're not separate from it. So we can see something as something and understand that it's also in our mind.
Now, one of the things that I found fascinating when I started researching this years and years ago, the paranormal and even mediumship, is the astral plane. Are people actually traveling somewhere when they're saying they're going on the astral plane?
That's been a bit of a struggle for me also, because I, as a teenager, when I was learning metaphysics, I was taught that there's this astral dimension that is separate from, but is an imprint, an energetic imprint of this reality, and you can travel to all these different places. Personally, I don't know. I haven't. I tried it. It didn't. I don't think it did much. I'm much more reliant on dreams and dreamtime symbolism than intentionally trying to astral project and look into a certain reality or project my etheric self to a certain place. That's something that I don't quite understand because it's just not my talent.
Mm.
So some people are very talented at that kind of thing and could say a lot more about it, but it's just not my skill.
Right. No, I mean, there are people that say when we're sleeping that depending on the dream, we are astral projecting. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I've had some experiences like that. Like, I worked with folks with disabilities for 15 years, and sometimes I'll have dreams where I am astral projecting into the group home that I used to work at, for example, or into the radio station where I used to work at. And get certain impressions. I think most of dream time is just this bizarre psychological dump that we can't consciously on.
Yeah.
She's like, it's just a mind warp.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. Like all of this work and even dreams, it's very, very hard to differentiate from your ego compared to, spiritual communication. I still have problems with that, being a medium and being able to sense these things that are not necessarily quote unquote here. But I always, this is probably my shadow self doing it. I always doubt myself, saying, it's all in your head. You're not hearing people that have passed. You're not hearing your spirit guides. It's just all in your head.
Sure.
How, in your opinion, how do you get it to where you work with your shadow more and get it to stop giving you those doubts?
Well, on one hand, there is, like you said, self-doubt, self-deprecation, lack of belief. Like shadow work and mediumship, empathetic work, psychic work, tarot reading, like I do is tarot. It's my main specialty. Like these things do not require us to be 100% accurate. No, nothing is 100% accurate.
Right.
We're just transmitters and we do the best we possibly can. So there will be times when we'll think, okay, is this just in my head? And is this really happening? What reinforces the opposite for me is when synchronicities happen, when things line up that, or you receive or say something that you couldn't have possibly known. And it's not from cold reading the other person or manipulating them. Just things that come and with transmission. And I think that's a confirmation that we have these skills. Um, and we don't have to prove it to anybody. Of course, we want to be confident in ourselves and in what we're doing in our professions and in our help for other people, because that's what it's all about, is just helping other people. That is my entire life goal. That's what I signed up for from the day I was born, is to help others. Obviously, that starts with the self. And so, yeah, I think it's wise to question psychic impressions, whether it's mediumship, empathy, traditional psychicism, divination, what have you. It's very wise to question oneself and the messages that one is receiving, because we don't want to trick ourselves. Because the shadow can trick us also. And the ego can trick us. So we don't want to, fall into the hands of trickery. We want to be ourselves and genuine as much as we can. And if we don't know something, we say that. We don't know it. We don't know. Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming that you do a type of protection before you start doing shadow work. How do you protect yourself when you're doing this type of work?
For me, because I fall back a little bit on ceremonial magic for protective work when it comes to a ritual setting, I'll do the LBRP, which is the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. So this is intoning various names of God, for lack of better terms, of the divine, into the self, and then basically evoking the archangels around and banishing negative influence before doing a working. And this can be different for everybody. It can simply be crossing yourself and It can be simply calling on angels. It can be burning herbs and doing that kind of cleansing, connecting with crystals. So it's just different for everybody else. Like, and that's the thing. I think we all need to go with our intuition and what works best for us.
Kind of goes back to what you said earlier about with the spell book, doing it the way that you want to, not necessarily how you've worked it out in the book.
Yeah.
Now, what is one of the biggest misconceptions about shadow work, in your opinion?
Well, I'd say that the biggest misconception is that it's about something outside of oneself. We all have that shadow self. We can look up or look back to Carl Jung about that research psychologically. But seeing the shadow as something external, even seeing demons as something outside of us and outside of our experience, seeing evil as something external. Oh, do you watch the news?
Yeah.
It's like, girl, there's some demonic stuff going on. Okay. There is the demon of greed, an insatiable greed occurring, and has done as long as I've known, as long as probably humankind. And the demon of, sadism and just enjoying others, the suffering of others. Yeah, these are real things. So doing shadow work doesn't mean exalting these horrible things. For me, shadow work means dissolving those horrible imprints, those horrible forces, because we need to go dig into the shadow to dissolve those things. It at the very least in our own lives, is including trauma imprints, abuses that we've endured. It doesn't mean that we need to curse the other person. No. We have to work on ourselves. It's all about working on ourselves. That is the first step. And then also, of course, protection, like you mentioned. The three main things that I recommend for protection when performing shadow work are the stone black tourmaline. Don't wear it every day. I talk about this in all of my empathy books. Esoteric Empathy was my first one. And then the one that's made for everyone is called the Everyday Empath, which is also on audiobook, the Everyday Empath. And then I created the Empath's Oracle deck, co-created that, which I'm very happy with, Empath's Oracle deck. So that's like, those are affirmation cards. But one thing that I say in all of those pieces is protect yourself, know yourself, and be humble with who you are, and use things that help protect you socially, whether it's black tourmaline, wearing a necklace, whether it's the other thing is yarrow. Yarrow is very protective. That's an herb, and that's a spray, as a tincture. And the other thing is just simply visualization, which goes a long way. Visualizing ourselves protected with a crystalline sphere that only allows goodness into us. I would also add that honoring our ancestors and the departed, people and animals, and our spirit team, whether we know them or not, is very valuable. We all have a spirit team, whether we know them or not.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I do regularly, and I've been doing it for a very long time, since before I even started going down this path, and that is talking stuff out with nobody around. Like, I'm basically what most people would think I'm talking to myself. But but I've always felt that somebody's there. So unintentionally, I was working with my spirit team and not even really thinking of it as such.
Right. And it, at least from what I can sense, is that our spirit team isn't only assigned to us. That's a very egoic, view to take. It's to be like, oh, they're only ours. This one's here for me. Oh no, they're all over the place. Time works differently over on the other side. We can't even fathom. We have no idea. Nobody can. Well, a few people can come back and report it, I guess, like to some degree, but um, like, yeah, but we just have to know that they're there because we all have a spirit team. And even if these are just pieces of ourselves, so what?
Mm-hmm.
Then they are. Doesn't matter.
Right. If it helps you and it works,
Yeah.
what's the difference?
Exactly.
Now, what is one thing that you hope people take from when they're reading this book?
With Shadow Magick Spellbook?
Yeah.
Um I want people to love themselves. That's really what it comes down to. Same with my books about empathy. My whole series, my empaths, Oracle, Esoteric Empathy, and the Everyday Empath. Same kind of theme, different approach. However, like what it alchemizes to and boils down to is please love and care for and respect yourself and realize that you are sacred. That's the biggest takeaway. You are sacred, child of the universe, and we are here for a reason. That's the biggest takeaway.
All right. Now, what's one simple shadow practice someone can try tonight to start working with their shadow?
Yeah, so the fact that you mentioned tonight being nighttime. Okay, so now we're invoking the nighttime. That's a good starting point because it doesn't matter what signs the planets are in or whatever the moon is in. The fact, yeah, it's nighttime. Oh yeah, that's the time for shadow work, isn't it? So, um, so I feel like somebody can just listen to what is coming up synchronistically in their own lives and being like, oh, this theme has been arising for me lately, or today I heard from XYZ, or um this is, or simply this thought is very prevalent on my mind. So I would invite people to sit with those thoughts and sensations and this evening and just be like, hey, okay, why is this coming up? So I'll give an example. Today, at the time of this recording, you remember I mentioned that I worked at a group home for many years. So I ended up texting out of allegedly nowhere. I don't want to say nowhere, but out of the, with a couple of the mothers of um, folks who are in that group home today. Boom, like we hardly ever text ever.
Okay.
And I had a dream last night about that very thing. And then there was another synchronicity where, I saw somebody with Down syndrome. And so all these things started piling up. And I'm like, okay, the universe is obviously speaking. So the message here is for me to reconnect ASAP with these folks from the group home that I worked with for so long. So again, synchronicity. Look at our synchronicity. That's where that's where the stillness is. We need to take a step back and be like, okay, what is the universe saying now? What are the repeating cycles right now? What are my dreams? What are my you know, emails? What are all these things? and take a step back and then try to engage. So when it comes to nighttime and like enacting shadow work right away, it's just about taking a step back. That's all I'd say.
Okay. Now, do you feel that we're getting signs and signals pretty much all the time, or is it just when we need to really notice something?
Um, I think they're always coming in, and we don't always notice them, but they'll come in much more strongly when the universe is being, or the guides or what have you are being, or the higher self is being like, hey, listen up. So when it really gets our attention, then we know. In everyday life, I think we're usually navigating and we'll get minor signs and synchronicities.
Okay.
I tend to neglect those a lot.
I think a lot of people do.
So, and then I'll realize it later. I'll be like, oh crap. That's what was being communicated by the universe.
All right. Well, that's fair enough, because I mean, there's a lot of people that will see something and just be like, oh, it's just coincidence.
Yeah.
So I totally feel that, especially, you know, just ignoring something, because I've seen it quite a bit where I'll ignore something and then I'll ignore it enough times and I'll get a very, very hard pressure in my third eye. I'll get a very hard pressure in my crown chakra. I'm like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah. It's like, listen up. What's up?
All right. Last question I have for you before I let you go.
Yeah.
Where can everyone find you and find your work?
So Raven, like the bird, and Digitalis, like the plant, which is the Latin name for foxglove, Digitalis. RavenDigitalis.com. You can also look me up under Raven Digitalis on Amazon, Goodreads, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all the things. I did delete my TikTok because evil. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people would probably agree with you.
oh yeah, these are some weird ass times. So it's like, yeah, gotta do what we can. And yeah. Thank you, listeners. Look me up, Raven Digitalis, and that's a digital with an IS at the end. And yeah, Raven Digitalis. And I, like I mentioned, I do professional tarot readings. A person can book with me. I've done this for over 20 years, our tarot consultations. I also do remote and in-person Reiki sessions. And I also provide spell kits and prayer kits for folks that, like I said, need a consultation. And then we go from there. I send them the ingredients. I do not cast for anybody. I provide them with the tools to do that on their own in an ethical manner. And print out a whole scroll and mail that, all these things. But that can all be found under the services portion of my website, ravendigitalis.com.
Excellent. Raven, thank you so much for being on ParaTruth Reborn.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, folks. That was Raven Digitalis, author of Shadow Magick Spellbook. That is it for us this week, Paratruthers. There's always more to the story. The deeper discussions, the theories, we don't air, the community behind it all, that's happening on our ParaTruth channels, as well as our Paratruthers group on Facebook. So if you're ready to go further down the rabbit hole, search ParaTruth Reborn and become a Paratruther. Until next week, folks, where you'll find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin. Talk to you guys later.